chosen. One of the few benefits of growing older is I can look back over my years and see where I made, consciously or unconsciously, a left turn instead of a right. I think about some women and events that not only changed my life, but put me on the path to where I am today. For better or worse, I made my own choices, but these women helped shape my story. Many years ago, I was at a dinner party in LA, and a woman I didn't know stood up and asked the group, would anybody like to share a studio across town in Venice? I would, I said, much to my then husband of 20 years' surprise. By the way, big left turn. I had been painting for 15 years or so in a little room in between my two children's bedrooms in my house. My kids insist to this day I stunted their growth because of the smell of turpentine wafting between the two rooms. I was excited beyond belief at the thought of having a real art studio and being with real artists and sharing our work and discussing and analyzing everything together. I had started drawing as a little girl, and only now was I willing to call myself an artist. I couldn't imagine what lay ahead of me. How could I ever have guessed? The backstory is this. There was a famous needlepoint designer in the 60s who taught design in her shop near my home in Beverly Hills. She was a tall, dramatic-looking woman who dressed in long dresses and long beads and colorful turbans that were put together beautifully from thrift shops all over town. After her husband died, she sold everything and bought a church in Venice called St. Gives by the Sea. That's just how she said it, St. Gives by the Sea. I can hear her plain as day. My turbaned friend lived in the front, stained glass windows and all. She had a worn fur thrown on her bed, and that was my first look and my falling in love with the glamour of shabby chic, the real shabby chic. I moved into one of the gloriously large studios, only by day, of course. And not only did I fall in love with Venice, but it changed my path forever. My nickname from my family as I was growing up was Rebel. I was the baby of 3 girls, and my father had great pride in his 3 girls. He would say, company's coming, go put on your makeup and your high heels. And I'd say, no, Dad, I'm 11. Hence, Rebel. Here I was years later, being rebellious again. I wanted to break the mold I was in. I wanted to investigate the outside world, apart from the safe, beautiful, but predictable bubble I grew up in and still lived. I had never known women like her, my turbaned friend, who made their own way in the world. At this studio, I met women who were painters and writers and photographers, and they all received money for what they loved to do. What a feeling of power and self-worth that must have given them. They climbed mountains, crossed the Sahara, then wrote about it and sold their stories and photographed it and sold that. Whatever they had, I wanted some. The atmosphere of St. Gives was joyful, with lots of cooking, guitar playing, and exchanging of ideas. I can still picture her in her long gown and beads, stirring a big pot of chili in one big open room that was bedroom, kitchen, and all the living space. It was the epitome of grand to me. I was always so jealous of those who lived there as I was leaving to go home to my quiet house in the hills. A couple of times I was able to stay for dinner when my husband was out of town. With mismatched, tasteful plates on a colorful tablecloth, we all ate together, where someone was playing a horn or a guitar in the background, or just some blues on the radio. It was just the best time I ever had. The studio was a 40-minute drive from our house, but I didn't care. After my son, My daughter had already left for college, went to school for the day, and my husband has long gone at 5 a.m. in the morning. I couldn't wait to jump in my car and go to my work too. St. Gives made me feel alive in a way I had never felt before. My kids made me feel alive. It was just my life didn't. During this time, Venice was emerging as a West Coast version of the Village in New York. Renowned artists lived and had fabulous studios there. Great restaurants emerged, owned by the artists and actors who hung out there day and night. The air was electrified. Venice was booming. I was 39, I was in the middle of it all, and I was enthralled. I brought my husband to meet the group, go to the restaurants, catch the excitement, but it didn't work. He was immediately threatened. I had found a way of life that appealed to me, and he knew it. He understood it, but he didn't like it. He wasn't dumb. The road that lay ahead of me was scary, but at this point I knew there was no turning back. I sold a couple of paintings to an actress friend named Suzanne Plachette, and she suggested it was time for me to have my own show. Can you imagine? She took me to a man who owned a popular boutique called The Staircase in Beverly Hills that sold antiques and paintings. He looked at a few of my works and agreed to a show. I said it would be no problem to have 30 or 40 paintings in 3 months' time. Was I crazy? I was doing tabletop still lifes at that time with colorful flowers on tablecloths and tables, and I was determined to do those paintings. I left that shop, and I didn't know whether to drop to my knees in a panic attack or scream with excitement. I decided to scream with excitement. I would go to the studio and work long hours every day. I was never so petrified. I was never so thrilled. Lunch breaks at the studio were so much fun. We all brought our own lunches and we would eat in the big main room and discuss our work. Who knew who would drop by? A musician, a chef, a writer, a cook on a break. And even though I loved these lunches, I was so excited with my work and my commitment, I couldn't wait to get back to work. Suzanne spread the word among her actress friends, and I received calls from Tina Sinatra and other famous Hollywood women of that day. They wanted to come over to the house before I hung the paintings in the staircase, so I would not be sold out before they got there. What? I was hoping I was going to sell one painting at the show so I wouldn't be humiliated. God bless them. They came over that day and bought 11 paintings. So I went into the show with 11 sold 21 that night, and was sold out in the next 2 days. I too was now making money for what I loved to do. I've had much bigger shows after that, in New York, Aspen, and LA, but none that ever thrilled me like that night. My group from St. Gives came, and my friends and family from Beverly Hills, and my two lives blended together, if only for that one night. I eventually did leave my life, albeit 10 years later, and designed a new one for myself filled with the creativity I had always dreamed of. It wasn't always perfect, my new life, but it was of my own invention. I moved to a new city. I arrived with only my dog and left whatever I knew and was safe behind me. I knew no one and was at times very lonely. I'd met a guy in LA right before I left. What would happen to that relationship? Sometimes carving out this new life was hard, but always interesting. I made wonderful new friends in my new hometown of Montecito. I bought a charming little house, and the first thing I did is I built my very first own studio that surrounded a tree and a guest room for my kids and friends. This was a dream come true for me. I think of those women from the studio often with gratitude. They showed me I could paint, design houses, design ceramics, write books, take photographs, and that life could be one big canvas. They led me to who I am today, a woman who is not afraid to take risks. They put me on the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Today at 82, I'm still creating and having the time of my life. Oh, and by the way, I married that guy that I met in LA, and we're living happily ever after. And I figured this out. Sometimes the scariest decisions are the best ones. Thank you.